Today we're going to talk about 5 essential tips for creating your first last will and testament. So we're going to go through 5 different things that you can consider when making your will. The first is caring for your spouse. How do you want to leave assets to your spouse? Do you want to leave a portion of your estate? Do you want to leave it in trust? Maybe they're not the ones to handle the money and you want to leave it in trust for somebody else to be in charge of those assets, to allow your spouse to, continue in the lifestyle that you've lived. When deciding your bequests to your spouse, you also want to consider whether you have children outside of the marriage. If you have children and your spouse has children and they're not your children together, you would want to consider preserving a part of your estate, perhaps in trust, to allow for the assets to be spent the way that you want them to be spent. Tip number 2, bequest to kids. You may want to consider outright inheritance versus trust for children. You want to think about how old your children are, spouses of those children, potential future spouses of your children, and how financially mature, how financially responsible those children are. You may want to think about putting assets into trust versus giving them a lump sum outright. Or, if your children are financially responsible, you don't have any worries about spouse's involvement or influence, then you can certainly leave your estate outright to your children. Tip number 3, choosing your executor. Often what we'll see here is they'll choose the person that's closest to, the testator will choose the person that's closest to them, which, that makes sense. A lot of times we see husband choosing wife, wife choosing husband, but make sure that person is capable of managing your estate. If it's not something that they've ever done before, it's a big responsibility. They have to be able to collect your assets, to manage debts, and to distribute according to your will. So think about those things before you pick who your executor or your trustee or any fiduciary is. Tip number 4, a will versus a living trust. What are the differences? We often have people come in asking for a revocable living trust or just a living trust, and there's key differences. A trust, a revocable living trust, you establish now, you manage during your life. You're basically transferring your assets, your estate, to a separate entity, and then that document controls your assets. This is something that we often see asked for in the context of avoiding probate. It does avoid probate, but usually we want to see other scenarios that are beneficial for a trust, like maybe if there's blended families or there's people that may not be responsible with money, or you want privacy for your estate. Those would be excellent reasons to establish a revocable living trust now. Tip number 5, additional estate documents. Here you want to think about your medical powers of attorney, your healthcare directives, who you want to be your guardian for yourself and your children. These are all documents that are applicable and come into effect during your life. We always think about your will and what happens after death, but a lot of times we forget to think about things that may happen during our lives that all of a sudden make us incapable of making certain decisions, and we want to have that planned for ahead of time. So in conclusion, think about these things, think about these tips for your estate planning. The first time you do a will, think about who you want your estate to go to, how you want it to go, and whether a trust makes sense for you.